Hello and welcome to Word Nerd Wednesday. A few little caveats before we get to the word, right? So first and foremost, I had been debating between whether I wanted to do slave this week or decide, which was something that was requested. By the way, you can make requests. I'm totally down for requests in the Word Nerd Wednesday sphere. And so I was waffling between the two because they both have interesting origins. That is my most used word, interesting. I'm going to try and replace it, curious origins. But walking home from the promenade one day, I basically had the thought that it was strange how science or testing had become this conversation that in my mind seemed kind of godlike. And I thought that to be ironic because it's supposed to be in opposition to or the counter understanding and the most powerful understanding and the most useful understanding. And at the same time, science is one form of observation, just like language is a form of observation, just like photography is a form of observation, just like any other thing you can use to describe what is taking place in what we call the world or the universe. And so I was curious to then understand what God means. So instead of slave or decide, this Word Nerd Wednesday, we're doing God. God is Old English. In our modern sensibilities can mean any of the following: supreme being, deity, the Christian God, image of God, godlike person. From Proto-Germanic, Guthen or Huthen or Chutan, I don't know. Also of Old Saxon, Old Frisian, Dutch, Chad, Old High German, Hot, German, Hot, Old Norse, Hud, Gothic, Hup, or Gup, or however the hell else you say a G. From Proto-Indo-European, gut, or chut, which is G-H-U-T, and that means, and that means that which is invoked. Also of Old Church Slavonic, which we talked about last time, but I'll get to that in a minute, zovo, to call, and Sanskrit, huta, invoked, an epithet of Indra. From root, I can goo, Gheue, to call, invoke. So God means to invoke, to call, or invoked. In its original Proto-Indo-European roots related to both Old Church Slavonic and Sanskrit. Let's just pop over to Old Church Slavonic yet again. The earliest attested Slavic language known from 9th century Common Era. I learned that CE means Common Era today, y'all. Used by the Slavs of Macedonia and Bulgaria. So this language, or usually originally used by the Slavs of Macedonia and Bulgaria, has a common ancestor in Sanskrit in terms of what it means, which is huta, invoked, and comes from hut, that which is invoked. Now, considering that is the definition of God, when you get down to the root of the word, anything can be God, depending on how you use it, right? I mean, if you use it, and here's the thing, people will say, when I say using it, I mean invoking God, the idea of God, regardless of your religion, or science in a manner with which you use it to block understanding of any other kind, right? Because that's how it becomes unuseful, but also totalitarian. That's how it becomes a god, when your excuse or your rationale for not understanding something is that thing. So for some people it's God, for some people it's science. So for instance, I read cards, tarot cards, oracle cards, all kinds of cards. I could even read playing cards. This is a weird thing. That's fine. But depending on your belief system of existence, right? It's not weirder than any other thing, necessarily. It's about a spectrum of understanding, right? So some people think life came from a bang. Some people think life came from a word, light. Some people think life came from a god. Some people think life came from aliens. Some people think life came from the sea. Some people don't think about life and its origins at all. All that to be considered, whatever you invoke as your primary source of understanding rules your world, is your God. Now, if you have a particular kind of understanding that in and of itself resists the influence of any other kind of understanding, then how is it any different than how religion has been used to oppress people, or how science has been used to oppress people, which it has, eugenics, Nazis, those were pretty bad dudes. But also the ideas in and of themselves, whether of science, of religion, of any other kind of practice that becomes paramount or most important in your life. If you invoke it to foster, to grow, to extend, to open to understanding, it will have a positive effect regardless of what it is, right? But if you invoke it to stop, to blockade, to suppress, to oppress, to reject the understandings of others, then it's useful only to you. That's not a problem. I'm just saying that whether you believe in the Bible or the Dhammapada or the Tao Te Ching or science, if you use it in a pot, or cards, or anima and cards and magic with a CK, and you use it to do good or to provide protections and extensions of the same freedoms you desire for yourself, for others, then there is no problem. The problem resides not in God and not in science, but of how people utilize these concepts. How do people invoke these concepts? How do people decide that these concepts are or are not important? I was listening to an interview with Paul Stamets, who's like a paramount, knowledgeable guru dude on all type of fungus and mycelium and mushrooms and all the kinds of ways that you can utilize these products, these natural things to improve our world, our human world. And something interesting that he said was he was having a conversation with someone who he considered to be a very intelligent person. And this person said that nature isn't intelligent, it doesn't have design. And I think that this is definitely something that has been supported by science more than religion, but that doesn't make it any worse for that reason. All that is to say, though, how does a human decide what nature is capable of when it is nature, when you as a human, you are nature? And so how can you decide that nature's not intelligent if you consider yourself intelligent? How? So only humans are intelligent, but the rest of the shit that happened before we got here is stupid? How do you come from stupid but be intelligent? How does something come from nothing? These things are paradoxical or even antithetical, not necessarily paradoxical all the time. So this whole conversation that I decided to have in my head that made me decide to do God today is very much just stemmed in sort of what's going on in the world. Lots of conversations around power and sex and how, let's for instance say what's going on in the country now. How does a woman prove through scientific, statistical, 100% proof, evidential stuff that what she says is true? This is interesting. This is an interesting conversation. This is a conversation about science as God or God as science, or invoking something in order to oppress others. It's something on my mind. But there's a little caveat here, all that is to say, because there is a debate about where the word God comes from. Some people trace it to a Proto-Indo-European word, ghu, gu, huh, which means poured, and has a root in gheu, gu, to pour, pour a libation. In Greek, that's, kain, Khein, to pour. Also kuta, kuta, Khute, kutagaya, which means poured earth, referring to a burial mound. And then it says to see the word found. So there's a debate about whether God comes from the Proto-Indo-European GHUT, which is to that which is invoked, or from the Proto-Indo-European GHU, meaning poured. I don't know what I gotta say about the poured element. Although, I mean, actually that's a lie. I have something to say about the poured aspect. If that's where God comes from, I think of it more or less like every human being comes into existence from a mother, butt naked and ignorant. I must say this shit all the time. I've already said it several times, probably in every video that I've done. But I need to reiterate this to people because this is the one unifying concept of us all. Born from another, butt naked and ignorant, right? So you arrive into life. You don't know what's going on. You got pushed out of a nice warm place. They slap you to make sure you're all right. Some of you get chopped right out the battlefield, you know. And so coming into this place, into life, we don't have any idea what's going on. We learn this along the way. And then at the end of a life, no matter how many years you have, you go elsewhere. Somewhere that we don't know, we call it death. So in that sense, poured, something in my mind, is poured from conception or birth. I have no political ideas about this. I'm not getting into that debate. And comes out when you die. Something is poured into you. Some people call it spirit. Some people call it the soul. Some people call it consciousness. Some people call it energy. Some people call it chi. Some people call it ori. Actually, that's probably technically not correct. But all that is to say that whether God comes from that which is invoked, hut, or poured, hu, from Proto-Indo-European, it still speaks to something in its origin that is profoundly powerful to the person who uses it, right? Whatever you invoke to decide what it is you're doing and how that thing has meaning, that is a powerful thing. So the word God is powerful. But based on what I've said today, it's not necessarily for the reasons that people think it is. That was kind of a somber way to end this Wednesday. I wasn't expecting to sort of like make that be so serious. I mean, it's an exciting concept. Just invoke shit that is meaningful and doesn't oppress others, and all should be well. God comes from a Proto-Indo-European word, hut, which means that which is invoked. But then, it doesn't work that you get to look up invoked to get a better understanding of that, because invoked, it's already in translation, you know? So like what it means in Proto-Indo-European, the word that we're calling invoked, might have a completely different linguistic origin than the word that we use that's invoked. So I can't like follow from the description of the word what it means necessarily. But sometimes when it says from the Proto-Indo-European GHU poured, from root GHEU to pour libation, source of Greek to pour, and the phrase kutagaya, poured earth, referring to a burial ground, and then it says sea found. See, so then you can follow that shit back. So found comes from fund, lowest part, bottom. It says lowest part in English, bottom, B-O-T-M, lowest part. And then you're supposed to follow bottom. All right, well, fuck it. Let's follow it. Old English, bodan, ground, soil, foundation, lowest or deepest part of anything. From Proto-Germanic, Buthm, B-U-T-H-M. Old Frisian, Old Norse, Dutch, Old High German, German. Proto-Indo-European root, budno, meaning bottom. So bottom comes from a Proto-Indo-European word meaning bottom. Thanks. Also Sanskrit, Budna, Avestan, Buna, Greek, Pythman, foundation, bottom means foundation. So that's interesting too, actually. Because if it comes from poured, and poured comes from found, because of burial mound, and found comes from fund, and fund comes from bottom, and bottom means bottom but also means foundation, then it also makes sense, because it's still like the definition or the outline, the framework of your life, right? The foundation of your life, God, the thing that is most important, that which you invoke the most. That's cool. But then it also says to look up Zeus, so we're going to do that. Supreme god of the ancient Greeks and master of the others. 1706 from Proto-Indo-European deus, meaning God. Source also of Latin deus, God. Old Persian devai, demon, evil god. Old Church Slavonic devai. Sanskrit devai, which is like slightly differently spelled. Sanskrit deva. And root is D-Y-E-U, dew, to shine. In derivative, sky, heaven, God. The God sense is originally shining, but whether as originally sun god or as a lightener is not now clear. A lightener? That's a pretty weird ass word to use right there, guys. I'm gonna have to call the questionable race card there, but brightener makes sense. So that's dope too. So Zeus comes from God, which comes from to shine. That's interesting too, though. All of what I'm using this word so much, and I'm gonna have to do a Word Nerd Wednesday on it, because what the fuck does interesting even mean at the point that you use it for everything? But that's dope. So God is either from the Proto-Indo-European, GHU, to pour, from Greek, but then from related to found to fund, to bottom, to foundation, or from Zeus, through Greek, Latin, Old Persian, Old Church Slavonic, Sanskrit, meaning God, but then from a root word, which it doesn't say, from a Proto-Indo-European root word, devos, from D-Y-E-U, dew, to shine. So either way, God, the meaning of God is that which is invoked, the foundation, or to shine. Now I say, that is the meaning of God.